All right, reason number 2, why someone might believe the Bible's full of contradictions, is that they might think the Bible has changed a lot over time. The Bible was written a long time ago. Citation is not needed there. We all know that. The Bible was written by over 40 different people in 3 different languages. And it talks about things that happen on 3 different continents, right? We see things that happen in Israel a lot in the Bible. Geographically, Israel would fall into Asia. We see in Paul and some of his missionary journeys and the churches he writes to, some of that takes place in Europe. And there are a lot of things in the Old Testament, in Jesus in the New Testament, that occur in Egypt, which is in Africa. So the Bible's talking about events on 3 different continents in 3 different languages, and again, authored by around 40, probably a little bit more than 40 different people. So you think about the variables, 3 languages, and all of these people writing on things happening around the world. You would think that the Bible would have a lot of issues lining up. Like we see that in book series. Joanne is wearing, I assume that is a Harry Potter, Gryffindor shirt.
Green.
Slytherin. We're going to Jake edit that out. Slytherin shirt. It's the green. Harry Potter. You think about, there's all kinds of plot holes. There's 7 books. 7 books from one author, and there's so many things that could have been different. Cedric Diggory died. Why didn't they use a time turner to go back and save him? They easily could have. Big plot hole. We see that in movies. Right? My wife's mad. She's a Harry Potter fan. We see that in movies. If anyone who's seen Avengers Endgame, raise your hand. Avengers Endgame. Most of us have. Pretty good movie, but you wonder, why didn't Doctor Strange use the time stone to bring life back to Tony Stark? He did it in the movie Doctor Strange with an apple. Easily could have saved him. Instead, he watched and looked on as Tony Stark faded away. Plot holes. They're everywhere, with just one person creating. But you think about the Bible, with the language barriers, and with the time barriers being written thousands of years apart, some of it, with all the people involved, we see that it is very, very, very consistent from cover to cover. Lots and lots of consistency found in the Bible. There are over 5,800 Greek copies of the New Testament. Like Greek, the original language it was written in. That is a lot. The New Testament, the copies of the New Testament in Greek, they are like 3 times the amount of copies we have of any other ancient text. The New Testament is a very, very well-documented source of ancient literature. The Old Testament also has around a couple thousand manuscripts copied as well that are cataloged. And within the last 100 years even, we've found more copies of what the Old Testament says in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s, only 80 years ago. Copies of books like Isaiah, Genesis, almost every single book in the Old Testament we have in the Hebrew or the Aramaic, and it lines up with what we already understand the Old Testament to say. So lots of consistency found there. And the reason for this is because while, yes, the Bible has a human author, we know that the Bible also has a divine author, God, which is why it does not contain any of these plot holes as we would think about it. The Bible tells us that God is the author in 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. The focal point there is that it's God-breathed. It is inspired by God to the human writers who then write it down. That doesn't mean every copy of, let me back up. It doesn't mean every single old copy of the Old New Testament are perfect. That's not true. There are plenty of old copies of the Old and New Testament where there are errors. There's like, you didn't have autocorrect or spell check when they were copying the Bible by hand, so people are going to mess up words. They might not be legible. People make mistakes. But luckily, since we have thousands and thousands of copies of the Bible, we can compare a difference and go with the majority rules.